Okay, we're live.
All right then. So welcome everyone. Welcome to the third day and the big finale of our first ever Ubuntu Online Summit. I'm David Planello from the Ubuntu community team at Canonical, and this the session where we traditionally have our track leads summarize the content of the sessions that have been happening during these 3 days of discussions. Today I'm joined by Alan Pope on the left from the community team. We've got next, and Alan is going to summarize the app development track, following by Daniel Holbach, also from the community team. He's going to be talking about what's been happening on the community track. Nicholas Cax is going to be summarizing the users track. Pat Gogan, Ubuntu Server Engineering Manager and described by herself as the queen of Ubuntu Server, is going to summarize the server track. Steve Langazek is going to summarize the foundations or development track. He's the engineering manager for the foundations team. And we're also joined by Svetlana Belkin, who's been actually rocking the community track, but he's having some audio problems, so she might switch between herself and Daniel Holbach. I think we've got quite a lot of exciting content to go through. So what I'll do is, without further ado, I'll leave it for our track leads to start. So starting with Alan. Alan, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, sure. If my video freaks out as it did just now, just shout at me and I'll do something.
No, it's not sort of psychedelic effect.
So we had a really busy app developer track this Ubuntu Online Summit, and I want to particularly call out to Neklesh, who is one of the core app developers, works on the Clock app and has been rocking the app dev track. He's been in pretty much every single session, just taking notes, leading sessions, doing like an awesome job. So I want to thank Niklesh because he's done an amazing job this time. So let's buzz through. On Tuesday we had a session, Ubuntu SDK Feedback. And during this session, the idea was to feedback to the SDK developers any issues or questions that came up from app developers. There were some interesting discussions about Pi other side. We've talked about how our SDK is mostly based around QML and HTML5 apps, but there were lots of questions about and discussions around using Python instead of QML and HTML5. Got a bunch of feature requests for the SDK, like supporting rich text in the header, better support for SVG icons, and an automatic style and performance lint checker. There was also a request to upstream the in-house improvements, like the pull to refresh, to upstream those to Qt, for example. We had a music app development session on Tuesday, which we have regular music app, core app discussions every week. We hang out on IRC and have hangouts. Everyone's welcome. It's a community developed app. And this was really just another one of our music app meetings. And in it we discussed the fact that we're still blocked on the music app moving from Grillo to the new Media Scanner 2.0. There's a few blockers in there, and the music app developers are coordinating well with the Media Scanner developers, James Henstridge and Thomas Voss, in order to feedback any issues that we get in the music app, because they're the primary user of the Media Scanner 2. For the RTM, for those that don't know, RTM is the release to manufacture date, which is a little bit later in the year, not much later in the year. But for RTM, Music App is going to be tested against a bunch of different use cases. So far, we've mostly been testing it with our music, but we want to increase the scope over the next month or so to try and get people using the Music App under different circumstances that we haven't currently tested for. And we've moved to using Trello for doing our feature tracking, and it's an open public Trello board, and we're tracking all of the core apps on there. There was a session about converging applications across devices, which is interesting for people who are, writing their first Ubuntu phone app and want to make sure that it works well on desktops and tablets as well. Neklesh led that with a demo of his application Flashback, which is a great example of an app that dynamically resizes across different form factors. And some tips and tricks were given to take into account before you start work on a convergent application. We then had a session on the clock app. The clock app, which many of you have seen, encompasses a clock, alarms, timer, and stopwatch. It's had a redesign at the recent Malta Sprint. A bunch of core apps developers came along, and the Canonical design team presented their new design. So we've got a clock app reboot, and Neklesh, the clock app dev, is working on that, and went through the new design, and some of the work items were taken for that work. Again, everything's being tracked in Trello, and there was a call out for additional developers to dive in and help with the rewrite, because it's quite a bit of work and we don't have a huge amount of time to do that. So if clocks are your thing, then by all means join us to help out there. So that's the end of Tuesday. On Wednesday, there was an Ubuntu SDK Features session where the SDK developers shared the goals for release to manufacture, and further goals beyond release to manufacture, leading off into October this year. Those were shared with app developers. So if you're interested in knowing what's coming in the SDK over the coming 2 months, 3 months, then I'd recommend looking at that session. There was a lot of discussion of how you can use kits and the emulator to develop and test your application. There was a demo of a Go QML app as well, and now Qt Creator has syntax highlighting for Go-based applications, which is good fun. So in summary, this summer we're going to get the new header design, pull to refresh, text input tweaks, conversion input layout tweaks, and in Qt Creator we'll have support for store integration directly from Qt Creator, which is pretty awesome. Scope support, the x86 emulator, Go QML support, and loads of other stuff. It's worth watching that session. There's loads of good stuff if you're an app developer. Along those lines, Dave Panella also had a session yesterday about how to use the Ubuntu emulator for app development. It was a good detailed session, really good zero to hero, everything you need to know to get started with the SDK and develop your apps in the emulator. The emulator story is very important for us, especially for people who don't have a device. So you want to be able to test your app in a phone-sized or phone-shaped window, along with all the other integration points that come with the software stack. So David gave a great intro to all of that, and gave a demo of one of our applications, the Reminders app, running inside the emulator. There was another session yesterday by Rick Spencer talking about one of his apps called Get There DC, which is an app that he wrote which pulls in information about public transport links in his local area, and he wrote an application that he uses every day in order to find locations for buses, trains, and so on in the DC area. And he went into a lot of detail about how the app was developed and how he uses location detection and so on. There was also a web apps workshop yesterday, and this was a presentation on the web apps concept, how to create and package a web app for Ubuntu, how to fine-tune the behavior, and there was a code demo on how to use the Online Accounts API to authenticate with web services like Facebook, Twitter, and you can do that both from QML and from HTML5 as well. And that wraps up Wednesday. Today, the first session we had on the App Dev track was the Core Apps Weekly Hangout. One thing that we learned from Malta was that the core app developers value having a lot of cross-application communication. So rather than just have each application developed as a little silo, they learned a lot from sitting around a table in Malta and talking to each other as well as talking to other teams. And so what we thought we'd do is have a regular Hangout with as many of the core apps as apps developers as we can in that Hangout, in order to keep that conversation going. So I won't go through all of the details there, but we reported on progress, reported on blockages, so that we could follow up with those blockages and get them unblocked. Yeah, it was a really good session, mostly for the cross collaboration between the core apps, but it's interesting for other people to drop in on as well. There was another interesting session led by Mike Sheldon and Ken Van Dyne about game development on Ubuntu Touch. This was a presentation covering game engines and when a developer should consider using an existing engine, or if QML provides what they need already. There was an introduction to Bacon 2D, the QML 2D game engine, and it covered features including some demos as well. There was a discussion of the roadmap, and showed off a proof of concept Bacon 2D editor. Never get tired of saying Bacon 2D, which allows drag and drop of game entities into a scene while running with live editing of physics properties. So it's quite good fun. It's still under active development, and I think Ken's looking for additional people to help out with that. We had a session on getting involved in core apps. This was more of a brainstorming session for us to try and figure out what we need to do to encourage more people to get contributing to the core apps, the clock, calendar, weather, and so on. And looked at ways in which we could reach out to other communities, promote the events that we're having more hack days, and basically anything we can do to try and encourage people to help the core apps developers, because it's not a huge team and they've got a lot of work to do and they're doing a really great job, but we need more people. So we looked at ways in which we can get more developers interested in that. And we also had an application showcase where we had a few apps shown off, and Rick showed off again his Get There DC. Mike Hall demonstrated his Ubuntu Loco event finder. Mark from the security team showed his very rapidly developed TipCalc gratuity calculator app, and I showed off my stupid stallboard application. Finally, yes, I finally got to the end. There was a session about U1DB, it was kind of a high-level introduction to U1DB and the main elements that are useful for app developers. There's a hands-on demo with a simple U1DB example for storing settings for your application, and a hands-on demo with more advanced queries and data display in lists. And I think that's everything.
Very good. Thanks, Alan, for the summary of the app development track. So next, perhaps Daniel and Svetlana, do you want to kick off the community summary?
Svetlana, is your audio working now? Okay. Yeah, first of all, I want to thank everyone who participated in the community track, also all the track leads, especially Svetlana has been, like what Poppy said earlier about Necklace, has been in almost every single session. Thanks a lot. Brilliant work. So yeah, we had loads and loads and loads of... Sorry?
I said not a problem.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. So yeah, we had loads of sessions, kicked off the sessions with introduction to Lubuntu. We had Phil Whiteside and Harry Weber talk about what Lubuntu is and what is planned next. Introduced everyone to all the individual sub-teams they have. Very interesting. Another big session was the utopic goals for the Ubuntu Women team. So to get more women involved in Ubuntu, the team has been looking at into adding a Get Involved quiz to the website. The plan is now to get it up on community.ubuntu.com. The Women's team also want to take a look at Harvest and see how it could be improved to show new developers what needs to get done. And Also, the team website will get more stories and updated best practices. More classroom sessions are planned as well. We had 2 community roundtables, and in the first one we discussed the dates for the next upcoming events. We're going to discuss them with all the stakeholders. We had a bunch of ideas for how we could further improve the online summit. So we expect announcement of the dates really soon. We will also work with the local community and the classroom team to organize the Global Jam and other tuition events this cycle. We also had a discussion about the local part of our community, and we want to look into making it easier to share stories and pictures of local events. So expect a lot more content on Plenary Ubuntu soon. And we also want to look into helping teams to train new coordinators and organizers on their respective local teams. Next up, we had a very interesting demo session. It was from fixed to image, how your patch makes it into Ubuntu. This was about this was a session which Łukasz led. He showed all the work the CI team had been has put into putting together an impressive process to get changes automatically built and tested, which makes it a lot easier for us to land high-quality changes in Ubuntu. Thanks a lot for that session. The next session was the Ubuntu documentation team roundtable, where the team discussed a number of initiatives to make it easier for newcomers to get involved with the team. So this includes a cleanup of current documentation and referring to it on Help Ubuntu.com and elsewhere. And regular meetings are planned again as well. Next up was the Kubuntu documentation team, and they talked about following the example of the Ubuntu GNOME team and setting up a Kubuntu promo team to help promote and gather contributors and then send them to the respective sub-teams, so for example, docs, development, and so on. They also talked about how to set up the docs Kubuntu org server to make it look more in line with the new Kubuntu site. Another demo session from the Ubuntu GNOME team. Ali Links talked about the team, the website, and the history of the flavor. And he and other team members also talked about future plans for the website, mainly about artwork. We had a very interesting session today about the app development training program. And this was about taking all the work we had put into the App Dev School program, which we started last cycle, where local teams such as the Chinese team, the Italian team, the Spanish team, they had a lot of workshops where people could learn how to write apps for Ubuntu, and we want to turn this into a more formal training program. And the first phase is going to start in July, so stay tuned for more news on that. And concluding the community track today, we had a roundtable of a fairly new team, the Ubuntu scientists team, and this was very interesting because the team was reviewing their website. They want to get more people involved, so they're going to conduct a number of interviews and see how Ubuntu and open source software are used in science circles and get more people involved and more visibility on that this way. Thanks a lot to everyone who contributed to this.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Daniel, for the community team track summary. And next, Nicholas, do you want to go next and tell us what happened on the users track?
Sure thing. So the users track was actually a new track for this summit, and so it represents an expansion of what we used to call VUDS to now what we're calling Ubuntu Online Summit. And really the goal would be more inclusive to everyone in the community. So really, if you use Ubuntu, there's a track for you, and it's a users track. So we had some great discussions from all sorts of different community members that spanned all sorts of topics. We talked about lots of different things, really. So thank you to all the contributors who stepped up and hosted a session. And for anyone who's sort of sitting on the sidelines or thinking about hosting a session, I would encourage you to consider sharing your knowledge and love of Ubuntu by hosting a session at the next summit. It's really quite painless, and I'd be happy to help. Anyways, so talking about the sessions, we had a session on the principles of test authoring, which Brandon shared, and that was actually earlier this morning. He shared, it was basically a presentation talking about writing tests and the different motivations for testing and some of the common pitfalls and traps. So we talked about different levels of testing and the mindset and the goals behind testing, and talking about how testing plays in with releasing, but it's not necessarily the motivation for releasing code or for writing tests and that sort of thing. We also talked and defined some key terms and had a pretty good discussion on just overall testing and test authoring. We also had a session on marketing in South Africa, and this was presented by Kapanda. Sadly, there's no video for the session. Some network connectivity sort of prevented us from having a proper video. It was really laggy, that sort of thing. But if this topic is of interest to you, I highly encourage you to check out the Etherpad. There's some links there. There's links to a discussion post, and as well as the presentation that we weren't able to present via video. And then, of course, go ahead and contact Kapanda if you see how you might be able to help and that sort of thing. So again, if it's of interest, just check the pad. Definitely an interesting session. Stephen also shared with us a session entitled Convergence Progress Report, and he shared basically the progress on the Convergent desktop. So what's going on with Unity 8. And so he talked about different ways how you can run it today, and essentially the best way to run it today is either to utilize the images which are being produced and are available on CD image, or to actually install the package from the Utopic archive and follow along. If you install it on an earlier version of Ubuntu, you're not going to be updated. So really it's best to stay on the development version for now or use an image. And real hardware is best as virtual machines don't work. Overall plans, the team is going to continue to maintain Unity 7, and they hope to see Unity 8 development be available alongside Unity 7 as releases come down the line, marching towards 16.04, which is the next LTS. The idea being that Unity 8 and the Converged desktop will have landed by then. Marco did a really awesome session on maximizing your productivity with Unity. So he showed off essentially all sorts of really neat tips and tricks on using Unity. I know I personally learned several interesting things. He went through keyboard shortcuts, how scopes work, and some really interesting interactions that I didn't even know existed with scopes, and several different just tweaks and that sort of thing. He also dove into changing the settings. I mean, he got really technical. There's things available to you if you're willing to dive in and do some decomp editing and that sort of thing. So things that aren't necessarily even in the UI. Really, really interesting stuff. And if you're one of those people who like to really tweak their desktop, you might be surprised with just what Unity can do. So I highly recommend watching the video, or if you wish, there's notes that are posted that he posted that you can sort of peruse through. And like I said, I know I picked up a helpful hint or two to incorporate them into my own workflow. Next, we have a couple sessions presented by Ali. And so Ali gave a presentation in the first session on Start Ubuntu and what the Start Ubuntu project is. So essentially, he gave us some background history and talked about the goals for the project. So Start Ubuntu its purpose is to promote Ubuntu and its official flavors to folks who are transitioning away from Windows XP and potentially other versions of Windows as well. The idea being that as support for these older OSs dry up and they have older machines and they may or may not be ready for an upgrade, but their OS needs to be upgraded. And so the idea behind the project is sort of market and do outreach and maybe even some support for people migrating. The second session that Ali hosted was one called How to Join and Contribute to Ubuntu Communities. And this was another excellent session. We had a lot of great feedback and contributions in the session. Essentially, Ali covered a presentation talking about what it means to join and how to join a community and start contributing. He went through several examples, looking at a couple different flavors of Ubuntu, talking through specifically how you might go about joining their community, what you needed to do. And then we started talking about some of the blockers to joining and talking about the need to be active, to not be afraid, and to be vocal. Ali also displays the fallacy that the only way to contribute was via development or code. And we pointed out that there are many different ways to contribute. You contribute via documentation, via testing, via outreach, via design, technical support, translations. The list goes on. There's a lot of ways to contribute to Ubuntu or one of its communities that does not involve writing code. So it was a really sort of great way to remind and remember. Even being vocal and active is a welcome and needed contribution. And then to close it out, we sort of discussed the joy and experience that comes with working with other folks who are like-minded. And so it was a really great session. I was really thankful for all the people who participated. Lastly, we had a session with Rick and Ali, and that was yesterday morning. And essentially it was just a live Q&A. Rick being the engineering VP and Ali being the desktop Unity guy. So they fielded questions from the audience on a wide range of subjects. I picked out a few. Will Unity 8 require a touchscreen? No. Ali celebrated the birth of his son very recently. Congratulations, Ali. Will Mirror run on older hardware? If you have open source drivers, yes. Binary drivers, it depends. People asked about porting Ubuntu Touch to their favorite devices. Again, the answer there is no plans to port beyond the official devices. Check the ports guide. There are a lot of good community ports. Rick talked a little bit about the cool things he liked in Unity 8, tab switching, and all sorts of other good stuff. Again, re-emphasizing that Unity 7 isn't dead. And one of the coolest things that came up was talking about A-port, and Rick shared that the way A-port errors are handled is planning to be changed to sort of make the user experience a bit better, to auto-send them, prompt in batches, and that sort of thing. So lots of great Q&A questions in there. It was overall an enjoyable hour. And that was pretty much it for the users track.
Great, thanks a lot, Nick, and thanks a lot to all of the other track leads for the users track. I think it was a really welcome addition to this new format of Ubuntu Online Summit, and I'm sure we'll see it much more used in the next summits as well, and it will be much more attractive for people who are not only interested in discussing the development plans. All right, so next we should probably go for server. Pat, are you up for it?
I am totally up for it. So let me find my notes. So the DevOps track covered kind of three areas. It covered Juju and then also server and OpenStack. So Antonio was kind enough to write up a summary of the of what happened in the Juju section. So I'm going to read that, but I quickly made sure he didn't sneak in anything that might make me say something silly. So so I'll start with what happened on the Juju side of things, and of course, like everyone else, you should go watch the videos because people put a lot of time, and I think there's a lot of really amazing content in there. So on the Juju side, they wanted to ensure folks knew about Juju, how to orchestrate services, develop charms, and get involved with crafting. And hopefully folks were at least able to attend, view, get started with Juju. But if you missed it, they'll have they've got charm schools coming up. And you can see what charm schools are coming up at jujuubuntu.com/events. So go check that out, attend a session. And for the charm authors, we discussed how to use other automation tools such as Ansible but he has a typo in there. Leverage playbooks where appropriate, how to leverage LXD for local Juju development. The LXD session was one that I'm personally very excited about because on my server side of things, we're all about LXC, and in general, how to start writing your own charms. We also made sure to include workflows for folks on Windows or OS X platforms, And for folks interested in upcoming events, we also had sessions for the Juju GUI and Juju Core. We also discussed how we are developing solutions around big data with Juju. And to finish off the Juju side of things, they made sure to visit the Juju Charm Store policy and begged folks to help with the charm audit. And Antonio and the rest of the Juju folks wanted me to thank to those who participated and viewed the Juju sessions. So that's that side, and it's a lovely write-up, and now you're going to get my more impromptu on the server and server side. So we had, I think, a lot of really, really amazing, awesome sessions. So we had 3 sessions on LXC. You got to go listen, people. So Serge and Stefan talked about, we had a planning session where they talked about future plans for LXC. We also had a session where we demonstrated a lot of the new features in LXC and how to use LXC. Really good session. A lot of good tips on how to use LXC. And then we also had a session on user namespaces, which they showed you how to use the new user namespace feature in general, but then also how to use it in containers. And Stefan actually showed us his desktop where he has his icons actually launch LXC containers and the apps are in it. So for example, you know, Chrome starts up in an LXC container, and he's done a blog post on this. It looks like great stuff, and I'm personally very motivated to go and figure out how to do this for my own system because I think it's so cool. I don't trust, you know, apps on my system, and to have them in a nice little lightweight jail like LXC is fantastic. So I'm hoping that we're going to do a follow-up video soon where he helps me get it set up on my system and everyone else gets to watch. So check that out, people. Okay, so next we had a System D QA because we heard a lot of people asking about System D, what's coming, you know, when is server going to move to it. So Dimitri from the Foundations team came and put up a couple slides, talked about the plans and, you know, how you can start using System D now and how we're going to move to it. And so it was a good discussion. Basically, from the server perspective, you know, if you want to use System D in 14.10, you know, this is our time to kind of play with it, get things sorted out, and our plan is that in 15.04 we'll move to System D, or we'll be doing what's happening for overall Ubuntu, but that's kind of the plan at this point. We also had a security Q&A session, which is also known as a security team reads meme tweets. So Mark, Seth, and John from the security team came in and talked about what they do and then how to better secure your server, in addition to having a little section in the end where we had them, the security guys, read meme tweets, and they were great sports. So if you want to hear Mark talk about what I think there was something about security being something about there was a cave and bat poo involved. So if you want to hear about that, you need to go watch this, and there's a lot of good information in that session. I've heard feedback about there being a lot of good stuff. Right before this, we had a database session, and we had several of the key community players in the database space on. So we talked about Percona, MySQL, MariaDB, and we'd already had plans to move to MySQL as MySQL 5.6 is the default in Utopic, but we also talked through some of the issues around System D and some other system setup issues we have with MySQL. And then we also on the meeting defined a couple of stretch goals for 14.10. So MariaDB is hoping that their goal, they're not sure they're going to get there, is that MariaDB 10 would be the default for 14.10. So it's sort of a stretch goal. And then in the kind of cluster space, we're hoping to get to a common Galera package. So we'll see if that happens. That it would be really beneficial to have a common package, because right now we have redundancy. Scott Mosier gave a tutorial on simple streams. So I don't know how much you guys hear about simple streams, but it provides like there's the metadata around all the cloud images and stuff are all simple streams, and it's an incredibly powerful tool. It's rather kind of, I would say it's an advanced user tool in terms of the command line, and so he walks through it, and definitely worth a watch if you're interested in that. And then we had a session on how to make the server release even more awesome than it already is. Kind of had a heated debate around doing package updates for the LTS. I don't think we solved it, but we're going to continue the discussion on the mailing list. So that's kind of what we did on the server side. And then on the OpenStack, we had basically 3 main sessions. We had an OpenStack charms discussion where we talked about what our as usual, talked about what happened in 14.04 and what we have planned for 14.10, which I think the net is that it's a really busy cycle. But we also talked about for 14.10 we put in place a new OpenStack charm, I guess, policy. Where we have basically a stable branch and a next branch, and we're basically following the Ubuntu development process about SRUs and being careful what we put in the stable branch to help bring our customers more stable, high-quality charms. We also had a session on OpenStack, and once again talked about what was in 14.04 and what's coming up in 14.10, where it's all supported and for how long, because that's something people want to know. What version of OpenStack is supported on Trusty and for how long, and what about Juno, which is going to release with Utopic? How long is that going to be supported on Trusty? So that's all in that session, and you can also get that if you look at the Cloud Archive webpage online. So we also talked about VMware, Power8 support, native LXC, IPv6, and Trove, and I was pretty pleased. I even stumped James Page with a question. So, and then last session I'll talk about. So Ryan Beiser and the rest of the team gave a demo on getting a simple OpenStack cloud deployed. We used a couple ways. So really, kind of, in on the stage and in a lot of places we kind of show, okay, here you go, and here's how you start it, and then we don't kind of go into much of the details and show what's going on kind of behind the curtain. So our goal is to kind of show what's happening behind the scenes, what's really going on, and really show this. It's really, we're really getting it done really fast, and it's really awesome. So that's what we did. We showed both a command line and GUI, and of course the demo gods were not on Ryan's side. So right at the end he was having some issues, so he plans, I think he calls it, he's going to have a revenge video soon where he's going to show it all going well. So that is it for the DevOps track. So back to you, David.
Excellent, thanks a lot. So as you guys can see, the Cloud DevOps track was one of the fullest, if not the fullest track that we had. So it's really good to see all of this going on. So thanks, Patricia, for summarizing that. And I think last but not least, we'll have Steve Langesek summarizing the highlights of the development track. So I'll leave it up to you, Steve.
Thanks, David. So yeah, we had a very exciting start to the Ubuntu development track this week, with the first session of the week on Tuesday was the KDE Frameworks Libraries for all Qt users. In this session, David Edmondson talked about how the KDE community has been building on top of 15 years of experience with desktop environments and apps using Qt, and they've now released an entire set of modularized Qt libraries to tackle all kinds of tasks ranging from extraction of zip archives to policy kit to handling of emoticons. So this includes how everything has been modularized and split into a tier-based framework to be easily reusable in any Qt-based application, including Ubuntu mobile apps, which should save many hours of development time. The next session up was about how to get your patch into Debian and Ubuntu. This is a good session for anybody who has ever had concerns about getting their code changes included in the distribution. It covered patch life cycles from creation to submission to review and landing in the archive. The focus on this particular session was on non-Ubuntu upstream projects, which typically come into Ubuntu by way of Debian and the wider open source community upstream projects. And then in a follow-up session, there was a focus on Ubuntu upstream projects and how merge proposals, test plans, and continuous integration are used to land updates and patches via the CI train, with also some words about the upcoming CI airline. So if you are interested at all in getting your code changes integrated into Ubuntu and you're wondering where to start between those two sessions, that should give you the answer. So yeah, I encourage you to go look at those videos if you have any questions about that. We then also had this week the Utopic Ubuntu Engineering Core Roadmap, where the Ubuntu Engineering Core teams each reflected on their deliverables from the 14.04 release and also discussed upcoming plans for the 14.10 cycle. Some of the big topics included in that were convergence, utopic kernel versions, the release to manufacturer milestones, and the CI airline. As Pat mentioned, the Ubuntu Development and Cloud DevOps had a shared session focusing on systemd deliverables. It was a mixture of presenting the current state of affairs and commitments for 14.10, as well as responding to user, developer, and sysadmin concerns regarding this transition. So the team identified a few areas which hadn't yet been covered and considered in the discussions so far, in particular around cloud images and OpenStack adoption of systemd in Ubuntu. Further discussions about that will be taken to blueprints and mailing lists, so follow the mailing lists if you want to be part of that conversation. There was then a session about Click on the desktop where the team discussed the next steps for bringing Click packages to the Ubuntu desktop. In a mere desktop session, it will be possible to install Clicks via the Unity Click scope. We just need to ensure that the Click package kit plugin works well with the existing app daemon infrastructure, and we need to fix some issues around the platform web browser on the desktop in order for this to fully work. A related session discussed the Unity 8 desktop preview session, which will be available in 14.10 as a separate image with Unity on Mir, no Xorg, and the ability to run GTK and Qt apps full screen, and the ability to install and run Click packages. Work on session management for Unity 8 is ongoing. Next, there was a session about system images for servers in which the team discussed how to build a read-only image updated version of Ubuntu Core, including some basic building blocks such as Click, Juju, and LXC to run contained workloads on top of it. To date, the system image updates have been targeted for over-the-air updates on phones, but some of the same principles see reusability for server environments, and the system image design includes a non-interactive backend that can be used in a GUI-less context, too. So the plan for 14.10 is to provide an experimental AMD64-only version, which people can either run in a VM or flash to a USB stick, boot, use, and update using system image as it's done on the phones today. And then finally, we had some roadmap sessions. Complementing the Web Apps workshop session on the app development track, the Web Apps team presented their development roadmap, which you should be able to find a link to the presentation of from the UOS session page. And the Unity team also presented their roadmap in two sessions, one on the roadmap for Unity APIs and one for the Unity 8 and Mir roadmap. So good sessions, everyone. And it's been a great track and a lot of exciting content. I hope you all go out and view those sessions.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Steve. So with this, I think we close what I think has been yet another successful Ubuntu Online Summit. It's actually our first ever in this format. We've been very excited to see the new users track. As we've said before, we've wanted to make the event much more inclusive, much more appealing to those who are not generally participating in development. And I think that's worked very well. From seeing it and from the feedback from users, we're very, very satisfied with the outcome of the new users track, and also with the format, with the new presentations. Not only UOS is not only about development discussions, but we've seen quite a lot of content and quite a lot of teams that have been presenting the progress from the last summit and what's coming towards RTM. For the next summit, we will have phones and tablets on the market, so expect much more exciting content coming on, and I'm really, really excited to actually be part of the next summit. And as a final note, then, what I'd really like to do is to thank everyone that's participated and who has made this summit possible. Any kind of participation, either contributors, users, engineers, developers, translators, documenters, everyone who's been watching the sessions, participating in the sessions, and in particular to track leads. Track leads work sometimes in the background, but they're the ones who make sure that the sessions on their tracks are really well coordinated, they are scheduled, and essentially that everything runs smoothly. So thank you everyone, track leads, thank you everyone who has been participating. And I think with this we can wrap up, perhaps go for a virtual or physical beer and see you all at the next UOS. Thanks a lot, everyone, and take care. Bye-bye.